Namaste and welcome to our second day of the first talk by Shree Mukeshbhai Bhavan. We will begin as we did yesterday by asking Harini Ben this afternoon to lead us into the opening prayer and a bhajan or dhoon to set the appropriate mood for the talk that is to follow. Thank you, Harini Ben.
Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurme Devam Sarvakareshu Sarvada Sarvakareshu Sarvada Sarvakareshu Sarvada Mahadeva Maheshwara Sai Narayana Mahadeva Maheshwara Sai Narayana Natnagara Dukha Bhanjana Sai Narayana Mahadeva Maheshwara Sai Narayana Karunakara Akhileshwara Sai Narayana Karunakara Akhileshwara Sai Narayana Allah tu Mahavireshu Sai Narayana Hridayeshwara Hariteshwara Sai Narayana Hridayeshwara Hariteshwara Sai Narayana Sai
Thank you so much, Harini Ben. We were regaled with the wonderful rendition of the verses by Harini Ben yesterday. Thank you, and thank you for the beautiful opening. Our salutations and prostrations to Bhagwan Sri Lakshmi Narayan, through whose grace all this is made possible. Shree Mukeshbhai Bhavan, Shree Jedabhai Shukla, devotees of the Lakshmi Narayan Mandir, all those that are present physically, and all those that are viewing this online. Namaste and welcome. Yesterday we were given a most thought-provoking and uplifting talk by Mukeshbhai. He started by giving us a sense of what is Dharma, where it can be found, how are we to discover this, what is the source from which we may get an understanding of what Dharma is. He then gave us an example of Bhakta Prahlad, where he demonstrated the one who understands and upholds Dharma, how they are protected. So we look forward to the continuation from there this evening, this afternoon. So without further ado, we'd like to now hand over to Mukeshbhai. But before we do that, if we could please ask Shri Jayadevbhai Shukla, our beloved resident priest, to please come and do the tilak.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, obeisance to the deities of the temple, Shree Lakshminarayan Bhagavan. Obeisance to our resident Pandit, Shree Jayadevbhai Shukla. And to Shree Jayadevbhai Shukla, I'd like to repeat part of what I repeated yesterday. Shri Jayadevbhai, आज मैं फिर कुछ एक और दो शब्द व्यक्त करूँगा जो मनुस्मृति में लिखा है धर्मो रक्षति धर्मो रक्षति रक्षितः. I got it wrong yesterday. यह सिर्फ केवल आपके मान्यता ही नहीं है, बल्कि आपकी व्यक्तिगत स्वाभाविक पुरुषार्थ मर्यादा भी है. और इस मंदिर की 50 साल की वर्षगांठ में इसके दरमियान जो भाव से आपने श्री लक्ष्मी नारायण के प्रति सेवा अर्पण की है, उसका लाभ समस्त समाज को प्राप्त हुआ है. इसलिए समाज की ओर से आपके प्रति फिर से मैं कृतज्ञता व्यक्त करता हूँ और साथ साथ समाज की ओर से आपके प्रति सहृदयपूर्वक प्रणाम. Ladies and gentlemen, the title of the talk is chosen by the theme to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the temple is those words from the laws of Manu, Darmo Rakshati, Rakshitah. He who upholds Dharma is protected by Dharma. So once more, for the benefit of those that are attending that were not here yesterday, I'd like to start off with the definition of the word Dharma. Thereafter, we'll look at another source this afternoon in which Dharma can be found. Thereafter, we will particularly look at the relationship between the word Satya and Dharma. And lastly, we'll look at how that has been put into practice. So with those 4 aspects, let's begin with the first, Dharma. It's generally translated as religion or duty or custom or righteousness, justice. But we should be open to it because the word is far bigger than that. And to be open to it, let's stay with the Sanskrit word dharma. In Sanskrita, the etymology of a word begins with its dhatu, the seed or root if you like. And from the dhatu, you add an affix, something that's fixed onto the word, which is called the pratyaya. The dhatu for dharma is the word dri. Now, in Sanskrita too, you don't get a word and its meaning, but you get an indication as to where the meaning can be understood, where the meaning can be discovered. So the word tree, which is the seed form or the root form from which the word dharma arises, the understanding of that lies in dharana. And dharana is in holding, in bearing, in supporting. So in bearing, in holding, in supporting, you will understand what the word dri means. And then we add the affix to the word, the pratyaya. And the pratyaya, through various rules of grammar, it starts off with man. And that affix, it's a krit type affix, which means it's sort of a verbal type affix, a verb. And the nature of it is also instrumental. So following those rules of grammar, the man becomes ma, and the word dri plus man ma becomes dharma. So it's an instrumental type of word, which means it's discovered through its action. You follow that? Now that's very significant to note, that it's discovered through its action. It's an instrumental type of verb, the affix that's put onto the dri. So it's in upholding, in bearing, in supporting. That's what the word dharma means. So we again looked at this yesterday, that all of us are upholding or supporting something. And the only question is what, and to what standard. So when you get up in the morning, already you're upholding, supporting, bearing something. The attitude with which you wake up in the morning already gives an indication as to the standard of what you're upholding, supporting. Is it a lethargic type of a wake up after countless alarms that are put on 5-minute snoozes? Or is it an enthusiastic type of rising up in the morning? The way you engage with family members, that's also has something of what you're upholding, what you're bearing, what you're supporting. The way the vocation is being undertaken, the determination and the devotion with which it is undertaken, that also is an indication of what you're actually bearing, what you're actually supporting, what you're actually upholding. So that is a sense of the word dharma. And the question we have to ask is, to what standard? What is the standard of my dharma? What is it that I am upholding? And what standard should it ought to be? So here we'll pause and we'll tick off the first part of the talk, which is an understanding of the word dharma. Okay? Where do we find dharma? Yesterday we looked at the Srimad Bhagavatam, and today we'll look at the Mahabharata. So when we discussed this yesterday, Sri Vyas Muni saw the Kaliyuga coming on, and in Kaliyuga he saw that the level of consciousness in humanity will be deteriorating. Their lifespan, health, ability to comprehend and understand things would be all on the decline. So how to help humanity during this age of Kali Yuga overcome this and fulfill the human function of uniting with the Absolute? He then took the Vedas and he split it into 4, and he realized, you know what, maybe this is also going to be too difficult for people in the Kali Yuga. So then he took the Vedas, having split them into 4, he created the Upanishads, and he thought, well, maybe this also is going to be too difficult for the people in the Kali Yuga. And then he created the Puranas, and the last of the Puranas which he created was the Mahabharata. I'll just pause here and go for the benefit of those that were not here yesterday. Having done all of this, Sri Vyas Muni was unhappy We had one of the greatest interventions in creation with Sri Narad Muni coming on, telling him what his omission was, and his omission was he hadn't adequately described the glories of God, and in describing all the glories of the Absolute, it will fill those who hear those glories with bhakti, and it is in the Kaliyuga, it is bhakti that will take one straight to the Absolute. The words of the Absolute will go straight into the heart directly. And then Sri Vyasmuni created the Srimad Bhagavatam, and we took the story of Prahlad from there yesterday. So, but before we get to the Srimad Bhagavatam, Sri Vyasmuni, the last of the scriptures that he compiled was the Mahabharata. And to put it into context, the Mahabharata is more than 100,000 verses. So you can understand it will take a lot of energy in the Kali Yuga to go through 100,000 verses. And the Srimad Bhagavatam in comparison is 18,000 verses. So what I have here, I've just brought for demonstration this first version of the Mahabharata that I've got. The translator is Shree Kesari Mohan Ganguly. I don't think there's been other translators. He did this early last century, the full 100,000 verses. And this is the English translation. I've got the Sanskrit English version of it as well, and that goes about that much. And really, it's, what can I say, what a work. And there's a story about the translator as well, Shree Kesari Mohan Ganguly. He refused to take credit for this. And while it was being published as an article in the newspaper at the time, about 100 years ago, or slightly later than that, they put it under another name, Rao. And it was only when he passed away that they said, we got to give your husband, they told his wife, we have to give your husband tribute for this. And then they put his name. So that's that. And now in the Srimad Bhagavata, the Mahabharata is full of Dharma. It is absolutely full of Dharma, every aspect of it. The one part, and it's in a way principally upheld by the five Pandavas. Now we may be familiar with the story of the Pandavas, the great war that took place in which they had to fight against injustice to regain their kingdom. And before the great war, there was Arjuna's despair at having to fight against his family members. And at that point, Krishna then answered all his questions, which today we refer to as the Song of God, the Bhagavad Gita. And now what happens after that when the war starts, it's an 18-day war. And those days was a gentleman's war, so there was no thing such as guerrilla warfare. They'd blow the conch in the morning, they'll fight in the battle. At sunset, they blow the conch and everybody goes to their camps. They even visited each other at night. But that war that rages on for 18 days, what a description. What a description. When I was going through it in detail, I was riveted at the edge of my seat. And I think that what came to my mind is I don't think you can ever get a movie director that will ever be able to depict the dramatization with which the events are described. It is beyond depiction. You've got to let your consciousness journey through all of this. And it's an 18-day, and the foremost of adversaries, in fact, the last of the Kshatriyas before the Kaliyuga comes in, are at war. And there's missiles flying and all sorts of weapons flying. And the missiles, in a way, not the way that we understand it now, but they had the power of a mantra, and taking a bow and arrow, the mantra could be converted into some form of a weapon. So this war rages on for 18 days, and it's just incredible to describe, and it's so beautifully translated by Shree Kesari Mohan Ganguly. At the end of the war, there's a scene that happens which describes the theme for the talk. He who protects Dharma is protected by Dharma. So the five Pandavas were embodiments of Dharma. They were embodiments of righteousness. The eldest son, so much so that Yudhishthira's other name was Dharma Raja. All of them upheld righteousness. There's one episode in there where there was a doubt about an astrological event, and Bhishma tells everybody, if there's any doubt, you look at the Pandavas' actions, Their actions are always precise and to the point. And if they had done this on this day, it means the calendar is wrong and they're right. That's the extent of their dharma. So they all upheld dharma, and the descriptions given of the Pandavas, it just elevates the mind. For example, Arjun, all of them, he never uttered a lie. He never spoke any of the words in which the last part of the word could not be audible. Never were his sentences out of context. Never was he said anything that was grammatically incorrect, let alone fulfilling all his vows and obligations, etc., etc., etc. So you can get a sense of the dharma that they upheld. So now at the end of the war, when they've won and they're going back to their camp, Krishna tells Arjun, now listen to me very carefully. When we get to the camp, I'd like you to alight off the chariot, take the horses away and take them far into the stable and be quite a distance from the chariot, and then I'll alight from the chariot. So Arjun does as he was told. Krishna is his charioteer. Krishna alights from the chariot. He takes the horses and he puts them far away into the stable. And then Sri Krishna Bhagavan alights from the chariot. And no sooner does he alight from the chariot, there's a huge explosion, and the entire chariot is incinerated completely the moment Krishna got off the chariot. And Arjun says, what happened? He says, well, during this 18 days of war, when all these missiles were flying at you, I was the one that absorbed the impact of all these missiles. So you get a sense of it? He who upholds Dharma is protected by Dharma. What a graphic description. He who protects Dharma he who upholds Dharma is protected by Dharma. All that 18 days, Krishna Bhagavan had absorbed all the energies of that missiles, and that's what kept the chariot going. Now there's another incident that happens, which is absolutely historic. After the war, Yudhishthira, who's the eldest of the Pandava, now regains the kingdom. But they're still on the battlefield, and he is in despair because he's had to kill family members on the other side. So he decides that he's going to renounce the kingdom and become an ascetic and go into the forest. And there's a lovely dialogue that happens between all his brothers convincing him otherwise. And Shree Vyasmuni is also there, and Shree Vyasmuni also convinces him otherwise. But he's quite, in a way, almost resolute that what he has done, he doesn't deserve to have the kingdom, and he's going to go and become an ascetic. But eventually, they convince him to stay on, and said that what he had to do was right, he shouldn't abandon the kingdom. So then he goes to Krishna, who's also there, and he says, what is the dharma through which I should run the kingdom? Now here, it's quite historic what happens, legendary. So much like Arjun had the despair before the war in fighting, and Krishna Bhagavan then resolved all his questions, which today we have as the Bhagavad Gita. At the end of the war, it was Yudhishthira who was in despair, and he asks Krishna, how should I rule? What is that dharma? So here Krishna Bhagavan says, there's one person still alive who knows all about Dharma. He's been upholding Dharma. And while he's still alive, you go to him, because when he passes away, all knowledge of Dharma will go with him. So you need to go to him now and extract all that you need to about Dharma. And the person that he's speaking about is their grandfather, Shree Bhishma Pitamaha. Oh, Cherebhai, Shree Bhishma Pitamaha. What a story. I think the whole of the Mahabharata is about Shree Bhishma Pitamaha. What a story, what a story. So, Shree Bhishma Pitamaha, out of duty, out of Dharma, had to fight on the opposite side. He is finally overcome by Krishna, by Arjun. And he had a boon that his father gave him, and this is a story for another day, that he could decide when his soul leaves the body. Imagine that. He could control when his soul leaves the body. So he was defeated in the battle, and Arjun made a bed made of arrows out of him, and Shree Bhishma Pitamaha is lying on that bed of arrows, and he's waiting for the auspicious day of the solstice in the northern hemisphere for when to decide that his soul will leave the body. So just incidentally, on Tuesday is the 21st of June. I can't tell you how I look forward to that. We're halfway through winter officially. It's the longest day, the longest night and the shortest day, halfway through winter. Great. So the similar date is on the 21st of December in the northern hemisphere. That's the winter solstice for them. But for the Vedic calendar works on a slightly different alignment of the Earth's axis, actually with stars. And there's a date called the 14th of January, Makar Sankranti, which is in a way partly related to the winter solstice there. And the date at which Bhishma leaves his body, to date is celebrated as Bhishma Ashtami, and it's not too far off from the 14th of January. So, coming back to this, Krishna Bhagavan tells Yudhishthira that go to Bhishma who's lying on his battlefield, and through questions extract everything that you can about Dharma. So Bhishma, the entire retinue with Sri Yudhishthira, they go to Bhishma who's lying on his battlefield, and the greatest of sages, I made a point at one point to memorize all their names, Vyas Muni, Narad Muni, they're all there together with Krishna Bhagavan. They go to Bhishma who's lying on his battlefield. And then what follows is absolutely, it brings a deep emotion to me, because there's this exchange between Krishna Bhagavan and Bhishma Pita. And Krishna Bhagavan tells Bhishma Pitamaha that Yudhishthira is going to ask you questions about Dharma, you need to answer it. And Bhishma Pitamaha says, but you are Vasudeva, you are God, you should answer it. Why are you asking me to answer it? But that exchange where Lord and devotee sings hymn to each other, it is absolutely, absolutely so deep and so touching. That particular hymn, my mother used to read every day without fail. And sometimes when she's reading it, if I'm hanging around the house, she says, come, listen to it. And the tears would just well out from her eyes as she sings this hymn of the exchange between Krishna and Bhishma Pitamaha. It is so beautiful. So there they are on the battlefield. And after that exchange, Krishna Bhagavan tells Bhishma Pitamaha, I will give you the strength to answer all the questions, but in allowing you to answer the questions rather than me, it will make you famous. Your name will forever stay in history. So then Bhishma Pitamaha answers Yudhishthira's questions. So the first question that Yudhishthira asks is, what is the prime duty of a king? What is the Dharma of a king? And Sri Bhishma Pitamaha first and foremost says, first I bow down to Dharma, I bow down to Krishna, I bow down to all the Brahmanas that are there, and I will answer you the question. And then he answers him, and amongst the first answers, he says, and this has stayed with me, that the only wealth of a king is his truth. How's that? That's among the first answers that he says. The only wealth of a king is his truth. Now this is in relation to the Dharma. Yudhishthira is asking, what is the Dharma of a king? Now that stayed with me. I must have read this about 25 years ago or so, and it just stayed with me. Think if all rulers in the world had that the only wealth of a king is his truth. And he says, other than truth, a king owns nothing. The treasury, the revenue that's collected, it belongs to the people. How's that? But the only wealth of a king is the truth. And so the questions continue. And I'm going to turn this book around this way, because if you can see this, this is the Mahabharata, and this dialogue that takes place between Yudhishthira and Bhishma is at least that much. It's about 25% of by volume of the entire Mahabharata. And everything that you want to know is in that dialogue. Everything and everything. So it starts off with kingly duties, and then it moves on to all other duties. So the relationship between a husband and a wife, the relationship between a wife and a mother-in-law, the relationship between a human being and God, everything is discussed. And once they move on from there, they get into the spiritual Dharma. And everything that you want to know about the teaching, it's in there as well. So for example, the Vishnu Sahasranam is recited by Bhishma. The 108 names of the sun god is recited by Bhishma. Everything is there. So I'm just going to turn this book around this way. And these post-it notes that you see here, they're very precious. It's a lifetime of notes that I've made. And here where they concentrated a lot more, this is the dialogue between Yudhishthira and Sri Bhishma Pitamaha. So everything that you need to know about Dharma, it's here. So we now conclude the second part of the talk. The first was a description of Dharma, second way it can be found. Now here, as I said, it's very sentimental, so emotional, this dialogue between Krishna and Bhishma Pitamaha. And eventually the questions are answered, and Sri Bhishma Pitamaha ascends to heaven. And so it's very appropriate here to stop, and we'll hear a dune from Sri Hariniben. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Thank you. In this dialogue, at one stage then, Yudhishthira asks Sri Bhishma Pitamaha that Satyam and Dharma have often been spoken about by the wise. Can you tell me more about Satyam and Dharma? So Satyam is truth, and Dharma is, as I said, we need to be open to what that means. So now we're coming to the third part of the talk, is the relationship between Satyam and Dharma. So let's hear these verses that Sri Bhishma Pitamaha answers in relation to this question, this relationship between Satyam and Dharma. Harinibin, can we have verses 4 and 5, please?
Satyam sada dharma satyam dharma sanatana satyameva namasyeta satyam hi paramagati.
Can you start again, please? The microphone was off.
Satyam satsu sada dharma satyam dharma sanatana satyameva namasyeta satyam hi paramagati.
So what this verse means, or just a loose translation, it says Satyam Satyu Sada Dharma. The Satyu has got a with ending. So with the good, and sometimes it's translated as with those that are devotional or with those that are good. Satyam, truth, is always Dharma. Satyam Satsu Sada Dharma. Do we see that? So truth is always Dharma. And then we have Satyam Dharma Sanatana. So truth is Dharma Sanatana, eternal. Right? So do we follow that so far? You're going to discover this in a very practical way in a few moments. Then the verse goes on to say, that's why we bow down to Satyam, Satyam Satsu Sada Dharma, Satyam Dharma Sanatana, Satyam Eva Namasyate, Satyam Hi Paramagati. So Satyam, truth, is the highest refuge for everyone. So that's that verse. And let's go on to the next verse, verse 5.
Satyam dharmastapo yoga satyam bharama sanatanam satyam yajna parah prokta sarvam satye pratishtitam.
Once more, please, Reniben.
Satyam dharmastapo yoga satyam brahma sanatanam satyam yajnah parah proktah sarvam satye pratishtitam.
So what Shree Bhishma Pitamaha is saying in this word to Shree Yudhishthira is that Satyam is Dharma, Satyam Dharma Stapo, Satyam, truth is Dharma, truth is austerity, truth is yoga. Truth is the eternal reality. Now you're going to discover this in a few moments. How's that? We're going to get there step by step, okay? Truth is the eternal reality. It is said, Satyam Yajna Param Prokta, it is said that Satyam is the highest sacrifice, and we're going to learn about that in the story. And then it says, everything, Sarvam Satye Pratishtita, everything is established, is founded in truth. So we see the relationship here between Satyam and Dharma, and a few definitions of Satyam. And then a bit later on, he gives 13 qualities of what is Satyam, 13 qualities of truth. Hariniben, can you verses 8 and 9 in Sanskrit and then in English, please?
Satyam cha samata chaiva damaschaiva na sanshaya atma saryam kshama chaiva hristi tiksha na suryata tyago dhyana matharyatyam dhritischa satatang sthira ahimsa chaiva rajendra satyakarastrayodasha.
And can we have the English, please? I just want to say the English is work in progress. So these are alluding to what those 13 qualities are. The translations need to be refined on our part.
Satyam cha.
Sorry, the English.
In English.
Where's the page there again? Oh, that there. Thank you.
Truth, impartiality, self-control, forgiveness, modesty, endurance, goodness, renunciation, meditation, dignity, fortitude, compassion, non-injury.
Thank you. Now, in a way that Sri Bhishma Pitamaha has given these 13 qualities of truth, in the Manusmriti, Manu gives 10 qualities, not to, similar to these, which he defines as Sanatana Dharma. So, Harinibhen, can you then read that verse from Manusmriti, please? Let's see, this one here, from Manusmriti. There we go.
Dhriti, Kshama, Damo, Asteyam, Shaucha, Idam, Shauchamindriya Nigraha, Dhir Vidya, Satyama, Krodha, Satyam Akrodho, Dashakam, Dharma Lakshanam, Manusmriti.
And the English?
Patience, forgiveness, self-control, non-stealing, purification, mastery over sensory organs, spiritual intellect, spiritual knowledge, truth, and lack of anger are the 10 aspects of Dharma, the laws of Manu.
Thank you. So we have these 10 aspects of Dharma from the laws of Manu. We've got these other 13 qualities of truth from Sri Bhishma Pitamaha. Now this is where it's going to get exciting, like really exciting, okay? So, can you repeat after me? Satyam Satsu Sada Dharma. Satyam Dharma Sanatana. Good. So we're going to discover this aspect about Satyam and Satyam Dharma Sanatana. Okay? So let us just say the last. Satyam Dharma Sanatana. So this is where it's going to get really, really exciting. Okay? Now, to understand this word Sat, let's look at Sat first, right? Truth. Once again, if you look at the etymology of the word Sat, truth, the dhatu for that is us. And us, it's in state of easiness. It's a state of easiness in a way. That's the us. So that's truth. All right? Spiritual definition is that which does not change. That's truth. But to understand this even more, we're going to bring the word Satyam Sada Dharma together. Let's say that. Satyam Sada Dharma. Good. So to understand this word Sat and what it means with the easiness, the sort of existence, we're going to go into one of the 4 Mahavakyas in Vedic literature. And one of the 4 Mahavakyas is Tat Tvam Asi. Sound that? So the Tat means that, Tvam, that thou art. That's what it means. Tat Tvam Asi. Say that? Yes. So now I'm going to go into the definition of the word Tat, what that means. And I'm going to take this from what our founder of the school, Mr. Leon McLaren, the way he had put it. Now in Sanskrit, every word, every syllable has some deeper meaning. And the word tat is made up of a t without the a, so it's a t, and then you have a a, and then you have a t again. So let's open up this word. Can you say tat? Now we're going to open it up, go t, a, t. Now you're going to do it with your hands. One side, t, a, t. And that's tat. Once more, t, a, t. Very good. As I said, it's going to get really exciting now. So now I'd like you to stand up, and I'm going to demonstrate it here. All right, so if those are online, you could do this, or maybe they can't see me. Okay, so let's go t as far as possible. A, t. Very good. Once more. T, a, t. I see some people are taking strain. I'm really sorry if you're flexing these muscles for the first time, okay? So what the t, Jadabai, please be seated. I don't expect you to sit. Okay. So what the t means, it's a word that brings finality, and you get it in that sort of connotation, a word that brings finality. And what the t means, it's a moment that has passed. That's what the first t means. It's a moment that has passed. All right? So let us go t, the moment that has passed. And the moment that is about to happen, quick, this side, it's this t. All right, do you see that? Now let this moment pass. There you go. That's the t. There's another moment coming up, grab it, okay? And let that moment pass. Do you see that? So here's a moment that's gone. There's another moment coming. Gosh, grab that one, okay? And let that moment pass. Do we get a sense? That's the t here. Oh my gosh, another moment. Grab that moment, okay? And let it pass. Yo, another moment. This one's gone. Grab that one. Let it pass. What has been constant throughout all of this? You haven't shifted, right? So what the R represents in between, it's that existence. That's what the R represents. It's that existence. Moments come and moments go. Can we do that? Moments come and moments go. Moments come, moments go. Moments come and moments go. But this existence is right here. Do you get a sense of it? There's no time that you can deny your existence. And despite all the changes that your body has gone through, despite the changes that your mind and psyche has gone through, your existence has always been there and it has never changed. That is the R in between. It represents the us, it represents the truth, it represents the existence, it represents the reality that is permanent. And the word for permanent also is sanatana. It represents that reality that is permanent, that doesn't change. There's a moment that's come, grab it, let it go. Very good. There's another moment, let it come, let it grow. But that's what's in between is the us, the the reality, the absolute, absolute, absolute reality that does not change. That is Sat. Do we see that? Are you okay still with standing up? So we've got the word Sat so far, right? Now, in this moment, as the moment is coming, you could color that moment with something, isn't it? With your feelings, your emotions, or your agitations. And the word for color in Gujarati is rang. That's where you get the word rajas. It's one of the qualities of the guna. In that moment, you could color it with something. Worse still, in this moment that's passing, you could even fix it. All right? So how often do we carry things from the past still in our mind when it's not there in front of us? Do we see that? So, the work that we discussed yesterday, what Prahlad is telling us, is that in this moment, to undo that effect of the binding, to undo the effect of that coloring and to discover that which is. That is the work. And when you discover that which is, you discover the reality that is permanent and that does not change. That is truth, that is Sat. All good so far? You all okay with standing up? Almost done. I hope those online are standing up as well. So this is the word Tat, and from the word Tat we can get what it means of the reality, the truth that is now. Now there's a moment coming into this reality. This reality is eternal, and there's this moment coming. It could be a difficulty, it could be whatever. What are you going to uphold in this moment? What are you going to lawfully color it with? What are you going to uphold in this moment? Harini Ben, laws of Manu, please. Thank you. Sanskrit and English.
Dhriti, Kshama, Damo, Asteyam, Shaucham, Idam, Indriya, Nigraha, Dhir Vidya, Satyam, Akrodho, Dashakam, Dharma Lakshanam, Manusmriti, patience, forgiveness, self-control, not stealing, purification, mastery over sensory organs, spiritual intellect, spiritual knowledge, truth and lack of anger are the 10 aspects of Dharma.
Okay, so this moment is coming, and we here, and this moment is going to pass. What are you going to uphold in that moment? That's Dharma. So let's hear the English, please.
Patience, forgiveness, self-control, not stealing, purification, mastery over sensory organs, spiritual intellect, spiritual knowledge, truth, and lack of anger are the 10 aspects of Dharma.
So this moment, which is eternal and doesn't change, the qualities that needs to be filled in with that moment are these aspects of Dharma. So here we have the word Satyam Satsu Sada Dharma. Now repeat after me, Satyam Dharma Sanatana. Let's say that, Satyam Dharma Sanatana. Truth is that eternal Dharma. Do we get a sense of that word now? Satyam Dharma Sanatana. This is Sanatana Dharma, that eternal Dharma. Ladies and gentlemen, I've tired you out. I'm so sorry. Please be seated. So this concludes the third part of the talk. I said we're going to do a deep dive into the relationship between Satyam and Dharma. Now we come to the fourth part, which is looking at how this has been lived out. And we will look at the life of Harishchandra to see how this has been lived out. The prelude to Harishchandra's birth, it is so complicated. There's this one being antagonistic to this one, and this one banished to the forest and cursed, and this one being that. And then, it just gets too complicated, you know. And if somebody can make a soap opera out of that, everybody would be confused. So I'm not going to go through all of that because it's quite something. Harishchandra is born. And this story here, there's sort of elements of what appears to be slavery, etc. Don't put the connotation with modern day slavery. These are all related to this other part of the story which I won't go into, but it's just reverberations from that, okay? So don't see it as slavery, etc. So there's Harishchandra, and he was a righteous king upholding Dharma. He goes out just to investigate his kingdom, and once he comes across a lady that's in tears, and he can't bear a lady in tears for no reason, and he asks her, why are you crying? She says, well, there's the sage Vishwamitra who's performing austerities, but his austerities are giving me grief. So he goes to Vishwamitra and he says, you're causing this burden on the inhabitants. Please, would you be kind enough to go and do your austerities elsewhere? It's my dharma to protect the people here, and you should go and do your austerities elsewhere because it's inflicting this discomfort on the inhabitants. Now, like I said, there's a lot more factors that came into this. I'm just cutting it all out. It's so complicated. So Vishwamitra says, fine, and he goes, and he says, aha. So he thinks he's smart, he's upholding truth, etc. He disguises himself as a Brahman, and he comes to Harishchandra, and Harishchandra is doing a Rajsuya sacrifice, a Rajsuya yajna, and Vishwamitra, disguised as a Brahman, he says, I'll do the yajna for you. And so it's quite a big yajna, the sacrifice, and Vishwamitra in the form of this Brahman presides over it, and it's a successful yajna, the Rajsuya yajna. And now Vishwamitra in the form of the Brahman, he asks for his dakshina, okay? And Harishchandra was known to be generous. He never denied anything. That was part of his dharma. So his words are more or less to Vishwamitra, ask for whatever you'd like for the conclusion of the successful Rajsuya sacrifice. So Vishwamitra in the guise of the Brahman says, okay, give me your entire kingdom and everything in it. Harishchandra doesn't hesitate. He says, it's yours. So how's that? The entire kingdom is given it to Vishwamitra as dakshina. Dakshina is the gift you give to the teacher, the guru. After having done that, Vishwamitra says, there's one more thing, that's not all. I want 2 loads of gold. Now the units are mentioned in ancient terms, so I'm just going to stay with 2 loads of gold. Now Harishchandra says, but you've asked for my kingdom and everything in it, and that includes all the gold. I don't have more gold to give you. So Vishwamitra says, what? Are you going to go against your word? Your dharma is truth. You said, ask anything that you'd like, and I will give it to you. That was your words. I will give it to you. That is your truth. And it is said that your truth is your dharma, satyam dharma. That is what you practice. I want the 2 loads of gold. But if you don't want to, go back in their word. And Harishchandra cannot go back in his word because he knows that everything is upheld by truth. Sarvam satye pratishtita, that's the last bit of the other verse. Everything is upheld by truth. He cannot go back on his word. So he goes to his room, and what to do? He's there with his wife and children, and Vishwamitra comes knocking at the door and says, oh, by the way, this is not your room anymore. You've given the entire kingdom to me. You need to go. And according to ordinance, you have 1 month to give me the 2 loads of gold. So Harishchandra starts packing up a few things, and Vishwamitra says, hey, wait a moment. That's also mine. The only thing you can go with is the clothes that you're wearing. Out you go, this entire kingdom and everything in it is mine. So without any belongings, Harishchandra and his wife Taramati and his son Rohit, they leave the kingdom. And Harishchandra's got 1 month to make good his word on giving the 2 loads of gold. He doesn't know what to do now. He struggles, he's trying to raise money, he cannot. And halfway through into the month, Vishwamitra finds where he's living, somewhere in the streets, sidewalks, and he says, hey, where's my 2 loads of gold? And Harishchandra says, well, I still haven't got it, but we've still got another 2 weeks to go. Give me some time. So Harishchandra goes with his wife Taramati and his son Rohita. They go to Banaras, that is the town of Shiva. It was also called Kashi, and in modern day it's called Varanasi. So he goes there, he says this is the abode of Shiva, maybe there'll be some protection here. So no sooner that he goes there, and guess who's following right behind him? Vishwamitra, and says, hey, welcome to Banaras, where's my gold? And he says, well, I've just arrived here, give me some time. He says, well, there's about 5 days left, and you've got to get the gold. Or are you going to go against your word? And he says, no, I will not go against my word. That is, Satyam is my Dharma. The days go by, and on the penultimate day, they're sitting there, hunger, clothes all torn, and his wife Taramati sees this group of Brahmanas walking by. They seem to be very rich, and she tells Harishchandra, why don't you go and ask those Brahmans for some money, and they will repay your debt. Now I'm repeating this part of the story because it's a big lesson to be learned from here. Harishchandra says, no. As far as Brahmanas are concerned, we must give to them and never ever take from them. Taramati says, but you've done so much, and you've got 1 day left to keep your word. He says, come what may, my dharma is never to take from Brahmanas. As householders and as Kshatriyas, we should always give to Brahmans and never take from them. Now, this is worth repeating and stressing, okay? We must give to Brahmanas and never take from them. Now the last day comes, and guess who arrives on the scene? Vishwamitra. And he says, it's the last day for you to keep your word. I need my 2 loads of gold. Get on with it. So here Taramati says, after Vishwamitra is gone, he says, you know what, my good husband, why don't you sell me as a slave? I'm educated, so I'll be able to protect myself, but being educated and of good health, I'll fetch a lot of money as a slave. And this throws Harishchandra off. And the dialogue that happens there, it is so sad, really, really so sad. I couldn't bear, it was very, very difficult reading through this in the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam. It's almost afternoon, and Harishchandra, Taramati tells him, what's most important for you is that you keep the truth. You cannot go against the truth. So sell me. Anyway, I'm putting it so simply. He finally concedes, but the dialogue is quite deep. And he goes to the marketplace and he says, this is my wife, if anybody wants to buy her for a slave. And there's an old Brahman coming on a stick. And he looks at her and he says, I'll buy her. And then he looks at her age, looks at what's her qualifications, and he says, I'll give you this amount of gold. So he sells Taramati to this Brahman. And then it gets very graphic. He grabs her by the hair and he says, you are now my slave, and will you undertake to do all the duties that I ask you to do in the household from sunrise to however late at night? And she says, yes, I undertake to do whatever household duties to ask me from sunrise until however late at night. That's my word, but please give my husband the gold. And he gives him the gold, which is not enough. And he puts a rope around her and he drags her away. And as he's dragging her away, the young Rohit is crying for his mother. And he's running behind, and the Brahman is lashing with his whip, says, get away. And Taramati pleads to say, please, he's my son, he's got to come with me. I cannot abandon him. And so after much persuasions, he accepts for the son to go with. And at this point, Harishchandra is distraught, and the Brahman is dragging Taramati by the hair. He's got a rope around her neck, and he's dragging her into slavery. Vishwamitra comes and he says, where's my gold? And Harishchandra says, this is what I've got thus far. And there's a couple of hours to go before sunset. And Vishwamitra says, are you going to go against your word? He says, no, I will not go against my word. My truth is my dharma, satyam dharma. Truth is my dharma. I will stay with it no matter what. Give me some time. And then a Chandala comes about. Harishchandra goes to the marketplace and he says, if there's anybody here that will have me as a slave, he's going to sell himself now to keep to his word. And a Chandala comes about. Now, a Chandala is the worst in the society. They're outcasts, they're wretches. That's how it's described in the dictionary, the lowest of lowest. And the Chandala looks at Harishchandra, sees his strong arm, and says, I'll buy you. And Harishchandra says, you know, I'm a Kshatriya. I cannot be sold to a Chandala. Who comes on the scene? Vishwamitra, and he says, where's my money? And he says, I'm trying to sell myself as a slave. Then Harishchandra tells Vishwamitra, why don't I become your slave? And then that will be the difference. So Vishwamitra says, okay, I buy you as the slave, but it's just half the amount of gold that I'm going to give you. But I'm going to sell you to this Chandala and get the balance. And Harishchandra says, but I cannot be, I'm a Kshatriya, I cannot be sold, I cannot serve under Chandala. And Vishwamitra says, and he's right, you are now my slave, you're not the king anymore, so I can now sell you to the Chandala. So Harishchandra says, okay, you sell me to the Chandala, and with that, the score is then settled with the gold. So Vishwamitra sells him to the Chandala, and the score is settled with the gold. At this point, the gods from the heaven throw flowers, and there's kettle drums in the air, and they say, Harishchandra has kept to his word. Harishchandra has upheld his dharma of satya. Well, that's the story, ladies and gentlemen, about Harishchandra upholding the truth. It gets worse. On this side, the Brahmana that has taken Taramati is physically abusing her and making her work long hours. The Chandala takes Harishchandra, ties a rope around his neck, drags him to his house, keeps him in bondage as a slave for about a year. And after 1 year of him working as a slave with the Chandala, he tells me, you're now going to work at the crematorium that I'm responsible for. And you're going to live and survive at the crematorium. Your duty is to take out all the clothes from the dead bodies. And whatever food is being offered to those dead bodies, that's what you will survive on. Now let's just pause here. The first part of the story was Satyam. He kept his truth, isn't it? Good. Now I'll have to do the standing. That moment came, it's okay, Rajan, thank you. That moment came and it went, and he upheld the truth. The moment came and he went, and he didn't go against his word. His word was to pay that gold, and he did it. Now, in the second part of it, what is going to happen? What is the Dharma? And here, of the 13 aspects that Bhishma said are the qualities of truth, one of those qualities is titiksha. Let us sound that word, titiksha. And again, titiksha. It's a strong word. Let us sound it, titiksha. That means forbearance. So that word titiksha means forbearance. So here is Harishchandra, and he's living it all out as a slave. And what is he coloring that present moment with? It's titiksha, forbearance. Do you see that? That's what is coloring that present moment with titiksha, forbearance. So this is the lesson for us. These moments come, but what are you going to be upholding as it's going through your life in passing. Those are the 13 aspects of truth as Bhishma Pitamaha explained to Yudhishthira, or the 10 aspects of truth of Dharma as we heard in the Manusmriti, one of which is titiksha. And on the other side, Taramati is being physically abused. And her son Rohit one day is gone out to play, and a serpent bites him all over and he dies. The boys come running to Taramati and say, "Your son has died." And Taramati starts crying. And she tells the Brahman, "I need to go and see my son, he's dead." He takes out a whip and he lashes her. I said, "What? You gave me your word that you'll work from sunrise till however late I tell you to, and how dare you think of going against your word?" And she pleads and she says, "My son is dead. I've got to go and find him." He says, "You've got to finish what you do, and then you can go." As these moments are coming, titiksha. Let us say that. Forbearance. Do you see that? This is the reality. What's colored on now is that aspect of Dharma, forbearance. Her son is dead in the field. She's got to keep her word that she told him, "I'll work from sunrise till however late." He's making her do that. Forbearance, titiksha. She finishes all the work that she had to do, and she tells the Brahman, "May I now go?" And he says, "Yes, go. Find your son, take him to the crematorium, but promise to be back before sunrise because there's work to be done." She says, "I give you my word, I'll be back by sunrise." She goes, and it's dark. Her clothes are all torn. It's about 3 years has elapsed. Her hair's all long. She hasn't got the slightest glimpse of the beauty that she once held. She goes and she finds the son, and she's wailing there. And she's wailing so much at this fate that's come upon her. And these villagers happen to walk past, and they see her there, and they think this is a demoness that has killed a young boy. And they're asking her questions, but she's so overcome from grief that she can't even express herself. She says, "You demoness has killed this boy. We're going to sort you out." So they take her, they're thinking her this demoness, and they go to the Chandala, where Harishchandra is. And they tell this Chandala, "This is a demoness, kill her." And Chandala says, "No problem." He calls Harishchandra, he says, "Kill this woman." And Harishchandra says, now they cannot recognize each other. They cannot recognize each other because of all the years that have passed. And Harishchandra's been living at the crematorium all these years. He's been living off the food that's been offered to the dead, taking off the clothes of the dead and passing it on to the Chandala. And all this time, as the moment is passing, there's the reality, and what's needed of the quality of that reality for that moment is titiksha, endurance. Did I say titiksha, endurance? Forbearance, I beg your pardon. Yes. So this is an aspect of Sanatana Dharma. There's the reality which is eternal, and you bring the qualities into the moment. So we come back to the scene, and Harishchandra has been asked to kill this woman. He doesn't know it's his wife. And he tells the Chandala, "I'm a Kshatriya, and it's my oath never to bring harm to a woman. I cannot kill her." So the Chandala takes out his whip, and he gives Harishchandra a lashing, and he says, "You're no longer Kshatriya. You're my slave, I'm your master, and it's lawful for you to do whatever I tell you to do." And that is so. So Harishchandra is now forced to kill Taramati. The Chandala says, "Make sure you kill her. By the time I come back, her head must be chopped off." So the Chandala goes away, and Harishchandra takes out the sword, and Taramati pleads to say, please, I'm not a demoness. My son was killed. Let me go to the crematorium. Let me go and find his body and bring him back and get him cremated, and then you can kill me. And I need to do all of this before the sun rises because I've got to go back to my master. Moments are coming and going. What's being upheld? Titiksha, forbearance. Moment is coming and moment is going. What's being upheld? Titiksha, forbearance. Challenges are coming and moving on in waves, aren't they? Hey? It's just not ending, isn't it? It's just not ending. But the quality of that which is ever fixed, one aspect of it, is titiksha. And that's being upheld. That's the Dharma, forbearance. None of them has succumbed so far. Quite something, right? So you get a sense of this eternal Dharma, Sanatana Dharma, which Manu tells us are those 10 qualities of Dharma, and Sri Bhishma Pitamaha, those 13 aspects of truth. They're very closely related, similar. You can take them as one and the same in this reality that's now, that's being upheld. So she goes to the field, it's dark, she brings the sun, and the sun's got to be cremated. And Harishchandra then looks at the boy, and he looks at his limbs and his stature, and he says, this boy's got kingly qualities. He rubs off the dirt from the boy's face. He realizes it's his son. He looks closely at the woman, and he sees it's his wife. And she looks closely at him and sees it's Harishchandra. Now the boy's got to be cremated. And Taramati says, it's your son, he's got to be cremated. Harishchandra said, I gave my word to the Chandala that I will not cremate anyone without your permission and without the requisite fee. And Taramati doesn't have any money. And the boy's got to be cremated before the sunrise, and she's got to go. Is this becoming too much? Is it becoming too much? Well, it became too much for the gods as well. At that point, the gods descend down, with Brahma and everybody there, they descend down to the scene. They all descend down to the scene. And Brahma says, I am Brahma, I am Dharma, I am Vishnu, I am Shiva. And Indra is there and everybody is there, and they say, enough, enough, enough. Okay? And here, the story turns. The story turns as follows. Brahma says, I was the Chandala to test your truth. And here the translation, there's a bit of a conflict in the translation. And Indra says, and I was the Brahman that was testing your wife. But in some places it says it was Vishwamitra testing the wife. And it's just, they say, if today you have proven to the highest of standards what it is to uphold Dharma, what it is to uphold truth. You have exhibited it to the highest of standards. And with the flesh, the son is brought alive, and both of them are restored to their original stature. This is the demonstration of Sanatana Dharma, of Satyam, truth, and Dharma. That's what we said we're going to demonstrate. So, Brahma tells Harishchandra, you have gained the highest of merits. You and your wife have gained the highest of merits by upholding the truth to the highest, by upholding Dharma to the highest. You will ascend to heaven right now. What did Sri Bhishma Pitamaha tell Yudhishthira about the first part of Dharma? Can anybody remember? The only wealth of a king is his truth. So here, Harishchandra is being offered to go to heaven. And Harishchandra says, well, I'm restored as a king now. I have a duty towards my subjects. I cannot ascend to heaven because I have got a duty towards them. How's that? Look, he's even being tested now. And so he says, unless they can come with me, I won't go to heaven. So Indra says, but in your kingdom, there's some people that are good, some people that are very bad, some people that are really bad. What you going to do? He says, well, I'm responsible for all of them, good or bad. So whatever punya, whatever merits I have gained, distribute it amongst them. And having distributed it amongst them, let them all rise to heaven. And so it is. That all those that were deserving of the merit, of his merit, they all go to heaven. And Harishchandra installs Rohit as the son in the kingdom, and him and his wife, and this happens rare in the Vedic literature, absolutely rare. In their physical form, they are lifted up to heaven. The highest embodiment and the highest display of truth as Dharma. Satyam Dharma Sanatana. Let us say that. Satyam Dharma Sanatana. Harini Ben, can you repeat verses 4 and 5, please? The battery's gone.
Satyam Satsu Sada Dharma Satyam Dharma Sanatana Satyameva Namasyeta Satyam hi Paramagati Satyam Dharmastapo Yoga Satyam Brahma Sanatanam Satyam Yajna Parah Prohtah Sarvam Satye Pratishtitam.
Thank you, Harini Ben. And to celebrate Harishchandra's rise to heaven in his human form, let us have a dune, please.
Jai Jai Narayan Narayan Hari Hari Jai Jai Narayan Narayan Hari Hari Swami Narayan Narayan Hari Hari Teri Leela Prabhu hai Nyari Nyari Hari Hari Jai Jai Narayan Narayan Hari Hari Swami Narayan Narayan Hari Hari Teri Mahima Prabhu Ati Nyari Nyari Hari Hari Jai Jai Narayan Narayan Hari Hari Swami Narayan Narayan Hari Hari Jai Jai Narayan Narayan Hari Hari.
Thank you, Harini Ben. So let's summarize what has transpired thus far. We had the definition of Dharma, which we need to be open to. We looked this afternoon at where Dharma can be found in the Mahabharata and with the lives of the Pandavas, but in particular, primarily with the wisdom that Sri Bhishma Pitamaha passes on to Yudhishthira, the new king. From there, we've taken one sentence, which brings us to the third part of the talk that we had done, was the relationship between Satyam, Dharma. So Satyam, Dharma, Satyam Satsu Sada Dharma, Satyam Dharma Sanatana, Satyam Eva Namasyate, Satyam Hi Paramagati, Satyam Dharma Stapa Yoga, Satyam Brahma Sanatana, Satyam Yajna Paraprokta, Sarvam Satya Pratishtita. So you have this relationship between Satya, the truth, and you have Dharma. And we looked at this very practically. We look at it as a deep dive, that these moments are coming and going, but the reality is your existence, which hasn't changed. Our work is to discover what is that reality, and in doing so, as we heard with the words of Prahlad yesterday, we will discover the ultimate reality that exists. And when we realize that ultimate reality that exists, which is now, we'll see it in everywhere and everything. And with that, upholding the qualities of that as these moments come and not coloring it with anything else is this aspect of Dharma, which we've heard from Manusmriti and also from Bhishma Pitamaha, and in a most exemplary way demonstrated by Harishchandra and Taramati. So ladies and gentlemen, with that we conclude this talk. Thank you very much for listening. This brings it to an end. I'd just like to express a few personal words, if I may. Anil Bhai asked me to present the talk of yesterday and today. I was reluctant for a number of reasons. The one reason I was very reluctant for was, I'm sure there's so many people out there that can present such great talks. Why ask me? So I was very reluctant. But the other also is, it's a long weekend, and there's a lot of personal things that I had planned, and in particular for my work-related things. And in a way, the timing wasn't conducive. But I surrendered to that, and I said, I'll do it. But why I'm just sharing this is something that we heard from our founder, Mr. McLaren, that when you decide to serve, the universal forces act through you when you decide to serve. And what I just want to share with you, that when I said, okay, I'll serve as best as I can, the opportunity to present here, what happened was something quite beautiful this morning, which I'd like to share. Because I said I'll give the talk, and the story of Harishchandra and Taramati, I heard about it, my mother read it out to me a few times, but I had never looked at the original in the Sanskrit. Now I've got this book, the Devi Bhagavatam, it's different to the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Devi Bhagavatam. It's been lying on my bookshelf for maybe about 20 years. And because I had decided to serve and I was going to read it in its original, for the first time in 20 years, I took the Devi Bhagavatam off from the shelf and I began reading it. And the opening chapters gave me the answers that I've been looking for years about the history of Sri Shuka, about the nature of all the Puranas. It just came pouring forth. And I had to restrain myself from diving deep into that and forward wind to the story of Harishchandra. But if it hasn't been for this opportunity to serve, I would not have taken out that book, and it would have been another 10 years, if at all, when I would have taken out that book. So thank you for the opportunity to serve. This morning when I opened it, what I've learned and gained from there has been truly transformative. So I'm indebted to you, the organization, for allowing me this opportunity to serve. I've benefited a great deal. Lastly, in conclusion, I would address Jade Bhai. Jade Bhai, ये प्रवचन में कहीं न कहीं भूल तो हुई होगी, तो इसलिए आप ये मेरे अज्ञानता समझ करके माफ कीजिए.
It's in the lotus feet of Lakshmana, so no mistakes.
धन्यवाद.
Everything offered to the Lord Lakshmana.
Very good indeed. Thank you all very much, ladies and gentlemen. Let's just have a moment of stillness to allow the energies to subside and to recognize the lives of Harishchandra Taramati, of Sri Bhishma Pitamaha and Yudhishthira, and that aspect of reality which they have taught us, of Sanatana Dharma. Om Param Atmane Namah. Om Tat Sat Thank you.
Firstly, thank you, Mukeshbhai, for, again, what can one say? Such uplifting, inspiring, thought-provoking. I must say, I've heard the story of Raja Harishchandra so many times, and every time it brings a tear to my eyes. But thank you for putting it in such beautiful perspective, the real relevance of it. And I'm glad it was you who was saying it, because I think if I was standing here, I would have broken down in tears. It's such a magnificent story. But thank you for putting it into the perspective of Satya and Dharma. This was the first series. This is the first of a series of talks for the 50th anniversary, as was mentioned. There are other eminent speakers who will be invited, so do look out for it. This particular series have been live streamed, so please subscribe to the Lakshmi Narayan YouTube channel. The more subscribers we have, the better the ratings are, and the better it is that the channel is promoted in the greater scheme of things. Please do not hesitate to comment on the YouTube channel as well about any aspects of the talk, whatever you thought. It's always good to have people giving feedback. I was very pleasantly surprised. I had received many good messages, both last night and some earlier this morning, from people who had heard yesterday's talk, were feeling very inspired by it, and were glad that they had listened to it. It is available on the YouTube channel now, so please promote it, share it with others who think they would benefit from hearing these talks. At least they are there now for people anywhere in the world to be able to see it. This function would not have been possible without many things coming together. First and foremost, the grace of Bhagwan Sri Lakshmi Narayan. So we bow and acknowledge, first and foremost, that Supreme that had made all this possible, and our gratitude to that Supreme. To all the members of the Ramakrishna Vedanta Society who have helped make this event possible, to our technical team in particular, who always have to be much earlier, sometimes the day before, and when everyone else is gone, they're still busy packing up. But it's done with such love and devotion, with such a spirit of service. And it's nice that we have our young people who are taking on this responsibility. So our great gratitude to our technical team as well. To our singers, Harini Ben, Dipendra Bhai, Kiran Bhai yesterday, such beautiful rendition. We are always, always delighted to have them, to hear them sing. So thank you so much. I'd like to just share a perspective about Mukeshbhai. One of the reasons I had asked him to speak was not just because I knew he speaks so well, but really one of the young members told me yesterday that he's a householder. What he said to me is, he speaks our lingo. and that's nice. It's relevant because often we have these eminent speakers and the sannyasins, and it's right that they speak at that level. But here's a householder who is demonstrating how life can be lived, and it comes through in the speech. What's inspiring about this is we all householders. So this is possible for us. So thank you for the demonstration of that, Mukeshbhai. The words and all that is important, and it's touched the hearts of many, but it's that that to me is most significant. Lastly, our beloved and revered priest Shree Mukeshbhai. I think Mukeshbhai eloquently spoke it in Hindi. I get a good sense of what he said, but I don't always understand it as well. But I think he did real justice to it, so I need not say too much more. But I do need to acknowledge that really Mukeshbhai is the central pivot around which the munis' activities take place. It is his complete dedication to Bhagwan Sri Lakshmi Narayan, first and foremost, his complete dedication to duty to the mandir, and the energy and the selfless way in which he gives of himself, and his family does the same, that we are indebted to. There are many accolades that sometimes come. Oh, the Ramakrishna Vedanta Society is doing so much better than so many other organizations. But it's really, the truth be told, it's because the center is strong and stable. I think I've said too much. No need to say anything more. First, before we have our concluding bits, I'd like to call our vice chairman, one of our vice chairmen, Videshbhai Nana, to please come forward and to the Guru Dakshina for Mukeshbhai. Please, Mukeshbhai, if you could just come forward, please.
Thank you. So it was really a pleasure to serve, and the protocols call for Guru Dakshina. So we really need to observe Guru Dakshina. So firstly, I'm not Guru, so the Dakshina has been misplaced, and I acknowledge the bhavana with which this has been passed on to me. So I really am acknowledging, and I'm thankful for the protocols being followed and for this being passed on to me. However, it won't be dharmic. So I acknowledge this, I acknowledge the spirit, I acknowledge it all, but the real Guru, the presiding resident of the temple, Sri Jayadevbhai Shukla, it's only rightful and dharmic that whatever is in here, whatever contents are in here, I duly pass on to Jayadevbhai Shukla.
So, in conclusion, it would be best if we now recite something in praise of the Absolute. So, Harini Ben, if you could please render a dune or a bhajan, and then we'll end with the Shanti part when Harini Ben starts sounding the Shanti part, if we could all stand. Thank you all very much for your presence. To those online, thank you for your attendance as well. If you are here, please go home safely. And to all those online, be well, stay warm. Thank you. Namaste.
Achyutam Keshavam Krishna Damodaram Ramanarayanam Janaki Vallabham. Achyutam Keshavam Krishna Damodaram Ramanarayanam Janaki Vallabham. Achyutam Keshavam कृष्ण दामोदरं रामनारायणं जानकी वल्लभं रामनारायणं जानकी वल्लभं रामनारायणं जानकी वल्लभम् ॐ ध्येयो शान्ति अन्तरिक्षं शान्ति पृथिवी शान्ति आपः शान्ति ॐ सदयः शान्ति वनस्पतयः शान्तिः विश्वे